changing someone's diet can also improve depressive scores, and particularly the combined two.
A group of 100-year-old people who have perfectly clean arteries. They'd have one thing in common.
About 84% of the fat that you lose or that you expel from your body is through breathing.
What? Today you have the opportunity to improve the quality of your health. It's the most important thing you can do to live a happier, healthier life. And in this video, I bring together some of the top health experts to share with you how to master and optimize your health for a better life. If you enjoy it, make sure to like this video, comment below your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to this channel for more greatness. Is there a way you think I'll ever be able to burn belly fat for good?
There's a component, of course, with genetics. Now, with that said, we know that the leading science right now, and what's really beginning to finally explode and become a popular part of the lexicon, is epigenetics.
Yes.
And things that are above genetic control. Now, with that said, I think the first thing is having a understanding and an association with what fat actually is. And most folks have no idea. Unfortunately, we're at war with something we don't even understand. And so fat can be broken down into essentially 5 different categories at minimum. And a couple of these folks might have heard before, but we're gonna go even deeper. So the first type is subcutaneous fat. And subcutaneous fat is a type of white adipose tissue. This is the fat that's just below your skin. And so if you think about like fat on your arms or your thighs, your butt, you can also have some subcutaneous fat on your belly, but that's the stuff you can pinch. Now,
I can pinch a lot right here.
The other type of fat is visceral fat. And it's also known as omentum fat. And omentum fat is the kind of deeper recesses of your abdominal cavity, right? So this is the fat that's really kind of around the organs, kind of if you have a lot of visceral fat, putting stress on your pancreas and on your kidneys and just everything in your core.
This is the fat inside your not on the outside of your muscles, but inside your body.
Yeah, so it's like your abdominal cavity.
Gotcha. Your visceral fat, and you want less of that.
Yeah, this is the most dangerous type of fat. This is the fat that's most correlated with heart disease, with Alzheimer's, with type 2 diabetes. It's just putting stress on your core, everything, which there's so much around there.
Digestive tract, your organs, your liver, your stomach, everything.
And this is the stuff, it's a little bit more firm to the touch. It's a little bit harder to get your hands around. And so these are both still 2 types of white adipose tissue. These are storage fats. Okay, so your body's storing energy. And before I go on, let me preface by saying this. Our fat is actually amazing. It's one of the most important things that have made us the humans that we are today, is our ability to store energy and to go back and utilize that energy. Our fat is programmed to do what we've taught it to do. It's just doing what it's programmed to do. It's very good at it though. And it can be a little bit clingy, so you have to give the right messages, and that's part of the issue. So I just want to make that clear. And fat is also, we tend to think it's like scattered droplets of cells or unhappiness throughout our body, but it's really an organ itself. So
fat is an organ.
It's an organ. It's an organ that has this interconnected communication. And being that it's an organ, it produces its own hormones. All right, so it's like producing more hormones that encourage more fat storage if it gets out of hand. All right, so I want to preface by saying that.
Wait, is it an organ or is it like an organ?
It's an organ.
Fat is an organ.
Yes.
And
just like, for example.
So fat in our body is one organ and it's all connected. From the brain
connected.
From the fat in my brain to my belly to my toe.
Now there's different types of fat communities. Okay. All right. So this is another conversation. I go through all of these. I literally call it the fat communities in Eat Smarter and break this stuff down. So there's another type of fat in the white adipose tissue camp that a lot of people don't know about. It's called intramuscular fat. All right, intramuscular fat.
Is this the third type of fat?
Yeah. And so this type of fat really works on site to provide energy to your muscles. Now, when I went to school, my conventional education, I really was indoctrinated with an idea that fat and muscle are they have this dichotomy, like they're 2 different things, they're separate, but they actually work together. And intramuscular fat really provides, just to think about what it looks like, if you think about the marbling of a steak, all right, that's that's your intramuscular fat. Now that can get out of hand too, and you can get what we refer to as chubby muscles, all right, with the intramuscular fat. So there's too much white adipose tissue storage on that particular fat community, all right? So these three are white adipose tissue. These are storage fats. Now here's what's really amazing, and a lot of folks might know about this next one. We also have body fat that burns fat. So they're not storage fats. These are fats that contribute to the burning of energy. The first one that's becoming a lot more recognizable is brown adipose tissue, all right, or BAT, brown adipose tissue, or brown fat. Now, brown fat, the reason that it's brown is that it's so dense in mitochondria, all right?
Mitochondria are good, right?
Yeah, mitochondria are really the energy power plants of our cells, really producing the energy. When we talk about having energy, these are the power plants creating that energy. And mitochondria is where your fat actually gets burned, all right? So folks we're taught these like diet paradigms, like how does it work? Where does the fat go? How does it get burned? Your mitochondria actually are the place where the triglycerides get shipped to actually burn them and use them as fat. So brown adipose tissue is brown because it's so dense in mitochondria.
Side note, how do I go to bed weighing a certain amount and then I wake up and I lose 2 pounds? Where does that go? Is that just burned through sweat? Is that just mitochondria burning and it's disintegrating into the air? What is happening?
This is such a great question. So in Eat Smart, this is the first time in book form, we're walking people through how the process of fat loss actually happens. And it's just, the question should be like, where the hell does fat go?
Where does it go?
Does it go to
you just poop it out? Do you sweat it out? Does it?
You've got that.
Do I breathe it in?
You've got that Thanos keychain. Does it go to another dimension? Exactly. You know what I mean? But what they did, and this was so fascinating, they actually tracked the path of fat getting burned throughout the body and tracked how it actually is eliminated. And so what they discovered was that about 84% of the fat, because, okay, we have to preface by saying this. For us psychologically, in our culture, we tend to think of burning fat, if there's a visual of it, it's sweating.
Yeah.
Like we're at the gym, we're sweating it out. That's your fat cells crying, having a good breakup cry, you know? That's what we think.
Yeah.
But in actuality, about 84% of the fat that you lose or that you expel from your body is through breathing.
What?
Yeah, it's eliminated via your lungs. Yeah, it's carbon dioxide.
So no way. So fat
about
burns
84%.
in the body and then it goes into your lungs? It's like transporting through the lung cavity and then you breathe it out?
It's an eliminatory organ, you know? We don't think about that.
What?
We tend to think about like our gastrointestinal tract, our bladder as eliminatory organs, your lungs. And so you breathe about 84% of the fat that you lose comes out via your breath. And about a third of that happens while you're sleeping at night.
So you breathe fat out. That's how you burn it.
Yeah.
How much?
Caesar Milan is the dog whisperer.
Yes.
You're the fat whisperer.
Exactly. I burn it in my sleep. So wait a minute. How much fat do we burn through our lungs?
About 84% of it. So
all of our fat. So if I'm 100 pounds.
But this is not just you're breathing. It's all the metabolic processes that take place to create the metabolic kind of offshoots or
it just
metabolic
comes
waste.
through the mouth.
Right, through the breathing. You also do eliminate some of body fat through fluids. So about, somewhere around the ballpark of about 15%, 16 to 14% sweat,
and
urine,
bathroom.
Tears. All of these things are eliminating
fat
products.
Fat cells.
Yeah.
Is the fat? It looks coagulated when you look at it in your body, right? So how does it break down and then turn into just nothing that you can see?
Yeah, it's a very complex and beautiful process.
The body is fascinating what it can do.
It is. And we go through, and it can be so overwhelming, but what I did was I made it an analogy in the book of a theater, making your body like a cellular movie theater. And there are particular ushers who are there to put fat into the seats. So we tend to think that fat cells, we're trying to, quote, kill fat or burn fat, but that's not really how it works, actually. Your fat cells are storage containers, and what they're getting filled with, the fat cells, basically, when you're born, you have a certain allotment of fat cells, all right? You can't just indiscriminately kill them. They get filled with more and more energy. It makes the fat cell expand. So what we're trying to do is to get the fat cell to let go of its contents so it can be used as fuel.
Right.
All right? And so there are two enzymes that are really the head ushers that push the fat contents or triglycerides into the fat cell, or they usher them out when it's time to leave. So one of his hormone-sensitive lipase is the one that comes and gets folks out of the theater, all right? Lipoprotein lipase takes the triglycerides and ushers them into the theater, all right? And then there's organs that kind of dominate and regulate what those enzymes are doing. You know, namely your pancreas is like the mother of two brothers who have two different roles. One of them is insulin, and the other one, its brother, is glucagon. All right, insulin is so, man, when you think of insulin, what do you think of though?
Eating sugar.
Yeah.
That's what I think of, because insulin spikes in the body when you eat sugar, right?
Yeah, and most folks think of diabetes too. It's like tied into that lexicon.
Of course.
But insulin is so important for our survival. It's a super amazing.
We need it.
Yes, you absolutely have to have insulin. And if you're born, in a condition where you have type 1 diabetes and the beta cells in your pancreas aren't even making insulin, like you can die. Your cells won't get energy. So now here's the thing. Insulin's job is to store energy. All right? Yeah, and to encourage all those enzymes and to do their work as well. So when it's out of hand, when insulin is too active, it can be a problem.
It's storing too much fat.
Yeah.
At this point, it's probably pretty clear to you that all the different health experts we have here on the School of Greatness agree that in order to have a healthy body, it starts with having a healthy mind. And I'm assuming you're here right now because you want to learn how to optimize weight loss for yourself and create better habits so that you can transform your body in better shape. But what we've learned through research and science and all the different experts is that you can't just focus on the body, you must focus on optimizing your mindset in this process for weight loss. And that's why I'm partnering with Noom. They use proven psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy practices, as well as matching you with a goal specialist so that you can have all the tools to help you finally achieve your nutrition and fitness goals. Check the link in the description below to take Noom's 5-minute quiz so they can learn more about you and your health goals and help you get back on track to living a healthier life. Now, let's get back to the content.
What are you doing personally to help with staying young, anti-aging, beyond food? Are you doing stem cell?
Yes. If you were to pick the number 1, 2, and 3 thing around longevity, it would be your diet.
Yeah, really?
And then, yeah, for sure. I mean, you cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet.
I hope I look as good as you when I'm your age. So.
I'm 61.
It's unbelievable, man. It's great.
I've been working out, yeah. So I think exercise obviously is really important. Sleep, meditation, all those things. Those are the foundational things. Mm-hmm. And then there's all the hacks, right? And I think there's a whole class of things that people are using, from things like NAD to peptides to exosomes to hyperbaric chambers to ozone. I think these are all around the corner, and I use a lot of them personally. I use ozone, I use peptides, I'll use exosomes. I'd like to get a hyperbaric chamber, but I can't get that. But there's a lot of really cool things out there on longevity, and I think we just launched our longevity roadmap docuseries, which discusses all this sort of emerging technology around aging. And people, I think it's called Longevity Roadmap. I think they just Google it.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. What would you say are the 3 things you would keep doing for as long as you could to help you with anti-aging and living longer and staying? Would it be the peptides? Would it be something else?
I listen. I think it's like those are like, there's the 80 and that's the 20. So that's the 20 is all that fancy stuff, and the 80 is
food.
Your food.
Sleep,
and fit exercise. And I've been doing more strength training, and I've been doing more cardio, and I think sleep and meditation. And then the other thing that people often don't think about for longevity is community, love, because love is medicine, just like food is medicine.
Absolutely.
And
I think stress in your heart, you're gonna die. I mean, it's gonna make you sick.
It's really true. And what's really striking is when you look at the data, some of the most potent predictors of longevity is not your diet, actually. It's whether you are socially connected. Mm-hmm. So if you're part of a knitting club or a bridge club or a bowling club, like the longevity numbers just go crazy. And there's a great study that was done years ago in a little town called, I think it's called Rosario, what was it? Rose something, Pennsylvania. And it was basically in a community of Italians from this one little village in Italy that all kind of moved over to this one town years and years ago. And they kind of left their old Italian diet behind and adopted the American diet. But this community was so tightly knit, and they had all different economic spectrums in the community, but they were always there for each other. They would eat birthdays and parties and holidays. There was a sense of connection and love in the community. It was really unique. And what was striking is even though they adopted all the American lifestyle habits, they didn't get the same mortality as the rest of Americans because they had this incredible social fabric that was providing them a foundation of love and connection and meaning and purpose. And what's striking is I just saw an article, even in one of the major medical journals, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that was striking to me because it was so clear that meaning and purpose are also predictive of longevity. So if you have no meaning and purpose in your life,
what's the point of being here? I might as well end it.
Right, you kind of have nothing to live for, right? So I think it's really quite interesting, and I think we're in this just moment where we're learning so much about medicine and well-being and health, and we are in a massive paradigm shift. That's what functional medicine is. That's what this book is about, The Pegan Diet. It's really a functional medicine view on food and nutrition and health and longevity.
You talked about insulin resistance as one of the leading causes of chronic disease today. What is insulin resistance? How do we prevent it? And then how do we treat it?
Yes. Well, great question. And I think we hinted about it a little bit before. But, 88% of Americans are in poor metabolic health, right? That's staggering. That's almost 9 out of 10 of us. And that is, poor metabolic health means insulin resistance. And I'm going to unpack that in a minute. 75% are overweight, 42% are obese, 40% of kids are overweight. I mean, it's terrible. 1 in 2 Americans has prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. All this is caused by the amount of starch and sugar in our diet, right? Broccoli is a carbohydrate. That's fine to eat. But white flour is also a carbohydrate. It's worse than sugar in your body. So the volume of starch and sugar, this predominantly our calories, is driving this poor metabolic health. And what happens when you eat starch and sugar, which, by the way, we really didn't have, right, for most of our human history. We basically were hunters and gatherers till 10,000 years ago. And then, if we had grains, we had whole grains. The milling of flour didn't happen till about 150 years ago. And when that started, and they started to actually refine the flour, is when we saw these nutritional deficiencies, like like beriberi and pellagra, and these horrible vitamin deficiencies. It was really terrible, and they actually, they actually discovered vitamins because they started depleting the food. So when we eat in a way that has all this starch and sugar, it causes our blood sugar to go up. That causes our insulin to respond to try to keep the blood sugar down. So you can have normal blood sugar if you go to your doctor. You can have a normal A1C, which is your average blood sugar. But if your insulin's high, you're in big trouble. I saw a guy who was 400 pounds. His blood sugar was perfect. His average blood sugar was perfect. His insulin was like 20 times normal because it was keeping everything down.
Oh, man.
Now, insulin gets that high because the body becomes resistant to the effects of the insulin. It's like the boy who cried wolf. So you need more and more and more insulin to get the blood sugar down. More and more insulin. What does that do? Well, insulin has a number of roles. In a small amount, it's good. Keeps your blood sugar good. If you're healthy, fine. If you have no insulin, you get type 1 diabetes, you need insulin shots. But most people have what we call type 2 or prediabetes or insulin resistance. And it turns out that this is the driver of cancer, like the most common cancers: prostate, breast, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. Heart disease, most heart attacks are caused by this. Diabetes, obviously. Dementia, they're calling type 3 diabetes. Depression. So many issues are driven by this insulin resistance that are burdening our society with chronic disease, which affects 6 out of 10 people. And so when you have this phenomenon in your body, it drives inflammation. It drives fat storage in your belly. It causes more hunger. It slows down your ability to lose weight. And it creates this vicious cycle of muscle loss and fat gain that it's like super fuel on the aging process. That's why you see diabetics, have far more heart attacks. They're 4 times the risk of dementia. They're more likely to get cancer. It's just all related to this phenomena. And if you're talking about the game of longevity, I remember this lecture I heard like 20 plus years ago from a Harvard professor who was talking about, preventive cardiology. He said, Mark, if you could take a group of 100-year-old people who have perfectly clean arteries, they'd have one thing in common. I said, what's that? He says they're insulin sensitive, meaning they are able to easily regulate their blood sugar with very minimal amounts of insulin. But most of us, Well, most because they're basically healthy, or they have genetics that help them, or they eat, well. But the key is to keep the game of aging is to keep your insulin low, right? And if you keep your insulin low, you're going to be activating all these anti-aging mechanisms in your body. If your insulin's high, you're going to accelerate all the aging. So that's why starch and sugar are poison.
When insulin is high, it's weakening immune system, it's increasing inflammation, which is making you age faster, essentially, and get sick, right?
Yes, and not only that, Lewis, what is happening now with COVID in America? Why are we the worst country in the world with COVID? It's not just political mismanagement. The fact is that we were the sitting duck perfect place for COVID to land and cause havoc. Why?
Because we're obese.
Because we're obese, we're overweight, we have chronic diseases, and these are all diseases of inflammation. So we are pre-inflamed. Mm-hmm. And when COVID hits, it's like gas on the fire, right? It just blows up your immune system, which is why you see these cytokine storms and this overwhelming inflammation in the body. It's not the virus that kills people. It's people's own bodies' overactive inflammation because it's primed because of our inflammatory diet. And so nobody's talking about this. I think Bill Maher is the only one I've seen talking about it in the media, who says, hey, guys, the thing we can do, yes, maybe we need to be protecting ourselves and practicing social distancing, maybe getting vaccines. That's a whole rabbit hole we shouldn't go down. But nobody's talking about
getting healthy,
our diet,
yeah,
or losing weight, or immunorejuvenation, or even things like vitamin D, which are so cheap and simple. I mean, if I were president, I would literally give free dose of vitamin D to every man, woman, and child in America. Just boom. Give it to them.
There's a lot of research showing that vitamin D is defending the body against COVID, right?
Yeah, if your vitamin D is low, you're 80% more likely to end up in the hospital and die. If your vitamin D is high, you're 94% less likely to end up in the hospital or in the ICU. 94%.
Right.
That's better than vaccines, right? With a lot less hassle and risk and side effects.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so how do we treat it then? What are the things that we need to do when our insulin is high?
Well, guess what? I wrote a book. It's a really good book. It's called The Pegan Diet,
yes.
And it helps you do that. And essentially the principles are, things that I'm almost embarrassed, Lewis, that I have my career telling people to do stuff that's so self-evident, right? Like eat real food.
Well, we all know, yeah.
Eat real food. Don't eat crap. Eat lots of vegetables. Eat lots of good fats. Get good quality protein. It's not that hard.
We're talking about the brain and food connection. Right now in the world, it seems like mental health and depression is a hot topic. It's something a lot of people are talking about. They're having mental health challenges, depression challenges. And I'm sure there's many factors to this: social media, comparison, bad foods, a lack of exercise, a lack of sleep, anxiety, up all night, environment, lack of purpose, there's a lot of social factors probably that tie into mental health challenges. How important is food by itself and relating to minimizing depression, social anxiety, and mental health?
I think food is extremely important because it's directly linked to obesity, and obesity itself causes low-grade inflammation. And foods that are really high, particularly when you combine a high saturated fat with a high refined sugar. So let's say you're drinking your glass of milk with your cookie. Like that's the worst because you're getting the saturated fat and the sugar.
That's my whole childhood.
And that's been shown to cause a very high, what's called postprandial inflammatory response. So we've been talking about postprandial glucose response, which is after you eat, so postprandial. There's a inflammatory response that also occurs after eating. And inflammation itself has been shown inflammatory molecules cross the blood-brain barrier, and they play a role in basically depressing dopamine signaling and serotonin and all sorts of affecting neurotransmitters and brain function. And there's been studies directly showing that if you inject a person with an inflammatory cytokine, it causes depressive symptoms versus
really
injected with saline. Yes.
So the more inflammation we have in the body, it increases depression.
Exactly. Inflammation. We used to think, again, the brain was separate from the body, and that, you know, the immune system and all that didn't, you know, affect the brain. Turns out that was all wrong. Absolutely wrong. And these inflammatory mediators do get into the brain, and they get into the brain and they change, you know, they're changing the firing of certain neurotransmitters and things like that. They're also activating the resident immune cells in the brain called microglia, astrocytes, microglia, a type of astrocyte. And, you know, that also is linked to depression. And so we put out a little short video on this, on an animated video actually, on inflammation and depression, and talk about a lot of the studies, because it's something I don't think people realize, that the food you eat, and not only the food you eat, your lifestyle, you know, being obese and overweight, being sedentary, you know, exercise is one of the best anti-inflammatory medicines you can get, period. And it also happens to be one of the, you know, best lifestyle remedies for depression as well. And I mean, randomized controlled trials showing that, all sorts of evidence. So
is this any type of exercise, or are you a HIIT training, a cardio, a 30 minutes, 60 minutes? What's your opinion?
Well, there's been studies looking at, you know, I would say the large body of evidence seems to show aerobic exercise is really important with respect to depression. And that is because aerobic exercise leads to increases in what's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF as it's called. It's basically a growth factor that's produced. You can, after just 20 minutes of a moderate intensity workout, you can increase your level. You can find levels increase by like up to 30% in plasma. It crosses into the brain, and in the brain, it does a lot of things. Not only does it do what IGF-1 does, it actually grows new neurons. It helps you grow new neurons, and it helps your neurons survive. So it plays an important role in preventing brain aging. But something else very unique that it does, it plays a role in what's called neuroplasticity. Yeah. Neuroplasticity is like your brain's ability to adapt to stressful conditions. You know, I mean, this is what children can do pretty good. As you get older, neuroplasticity goes down, as does everything. But neuroplasticity is important for being able to cope with stress, like the stress of a pandemic, for example. You know, more neuroplasticity helps with those stressful divorce people are going through, you know, or losing your job. Lots of stressful things, but neuroplasticity helps the brain cope with that. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor helps increase neuroplasticity, which decreases with age. So again, aerobic exercise was important, but you know, there's been studies linking strength training to lower depression rates as well.
Yeah, any type of exercise will help.
Exactly, I do, but I really think that aerobic, there is a place for aerobic with respect to the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
I always tell people that every day I try to put myself through some type of physical pain that makes me feel discomfort, whether that's sweating for 10 minutes or a 2-hour workout or playing basketball, hiking, whatever. I try to put my mind and body through something where I'm like, gosh, I don't want to do this. But by putting myself through pain, controlled pain, it sets me up to be more under control when there is chaos and pain. Right. And I think that's the key we should get to, is like controlled pain, healthy pain, so that you're not out of control when there is chaos and pain in the world.
What you're describing, scientists often refer to as hormesis, and that is basically a little bit of stress on the body, like exercise. Basically, because our body tries to maintain what's called homeostasis, a little bit of stress will cause our body to respond to that stress with a lot of anti-stress, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, growing new brain cells, and all these beneficial things. So a little bit of stress gives you a lot of good stuff, right?
Interesting.
Whereas low-grade chronic stress all the time, it doesn't do anything. You're not getting that. You're not getting that powerful.
Okay. Yeah, this is amazing. I'm going to say something that I hope I don't offend anyone when I say it. That I am all about self-love, self-care, loving yourself for who you are, accepting yourself for where you're at in your life, physically, emotionally, environment, financially, all that. the more I hear you talk about this, the quote unquote self-love movement of accept who you are and accept where you're at with your body and what you eat, and it's okay to eat whatever you want, just love yourself for who you are. Is that self-love mentality, that specific type of mentality, killing people and hurting them if they aren't willing to adapt no, it's not okay to continue to eat whatever you want all the time and just love yourself and accept yourself for who you are. You have to make sure you arm your body and your mind and your health with the nutrients, the tools, the exercise in order to decrease depression and increase happiness.
I think that there's absolutely, if you're going to just eat what you want and accept being obese, that you'll be causing yourself more harm, and both physically and mentally. And that also probably affects your loved ones as well, you know, that care about you, or perhaps that you're interacting with and you're in a terrible mood. And so, you know, when your neighbor's happy, you're happy, right? You know, so I think that there's part of this movement. I think there's a fine balance between you don't want to have your expectations so high that you can never be happy.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm never going to look perfect, and someone's always skinnier than me, and I'm
never going to have blue eyes. I'm never, you know, so if I'm always like, well, only people with blue eyes are the prettiest, like, then I'll never be happy. So like, that's an unreasonable expectation, right? In my mind. So, I mean, there are things where, you know, like I'm never going to be a billionaire. And if that's all I wanted in life to be happy, I'll never be happy. So there are things I think that you can, there's a certain balance between, I mean, you want your expectations to be high in a way. You want to always aim for what you know, aim for the stars in a way, and try to like work hard to get there. So what I'm trying to say is I think that self-love movement came from somewhere, right? I think there was something to that, right? But I think it sort of spiraled out of control, and what's happened now is you're saying, well, accept things that I don't want to change rather than you can, because you can change that. You can lose weight. You can eat different foods and get healthier.
Make different decisions.
People that are eating refined sugar, people that are drinking these sugar sweetened beverages, you know, and there's a lot of people, maybe not so many people listening to the podcast or watching it, but there are people that do. And, you know, there's been studies that have shown refined sugar acts on the reward pathway in the brain, dopamine pathway, in a very similar manner to controlled substances, drugs like nicotine, methamphetamine, not to the same degree, but they're acting on the same systems, and they're affecting
increases a feel-good hormone when you take it for the moment, but then it makes you decline afterwards and crash, right?
It does. And you know, I think the important point to realize with that is that when you take that away, when you stop, what happens is there is a withdrawal. And it's been shown, at least with, for example, with nicotine studies, that your dopamine's getting constantly fired. And so your what's called dopamine receptors, which basically the dopamine acts on to make you feel good, those start to decrease because your neurons are going, oh, well, I have so much of this around, I don't need so many of the receptors. So when you take away that thing that's causing the dopamine all the time to go away, you have fewer receptors, and now you don't feel as much. I mean, it's just really bad. You're not feeling any amount of dopamine, right? But it's been shown that sort of normalizes within 3 months. And 3 months is a long time, but it's actually not that long.
Of cutting out the sugar, you mean?
This has been shown with nicotine. I'm just drawing a parallel.
Got you.
I'm drawing a parallel saying, look, it's not going to be easy the first month.
It's not going to be easy. It's so hard. It's not
going to be easy the first month. It may not be easy the second month, but it's going to get easier. And it's not only is it going to get easier, you're going to be happier.
Your body's going to regulate itself. The hormones are going to regulate, right? Things are going to self-regulate.
Things start to get back to normal. Exactly.
It's very challenging, but it's necessary to get healthier and happier, right?
It is. I don't think people realize that, you know, depression, it's not just a genetic disorder. It's not just something that can't be fixed ever. No, in some cases, you know, there are definitely genetic cases of depression. I'm not saying that that's not the case.
But can you heal depression through food and nutrition and exercise? Well,
there have been studies that have shown that exercise can be a treatment for depression. And there have been studies that shown changing someone's diet can also improve depressive scores. And particularly the combined two is even more robust, which makes sense. You know, so there's something for people to realize, people that are maybe eating a not so healthy diet, people that are overweight, overweight, definitely obese. And if they do have depression, that there very well could be a link between the diet, the lifestyle, the obesity. Fat cells itself, they also they produce inflammatory cytokines. So independent of the whole eating the diet and the postprandial inflammatory response, just having fat, like particularly visceral fat, around your organs and stuff, like this stuff is causing low-grade inflammation. And do you know what low-grade inflammation is? It means that you're basically activating your immune cells a little bit all the time. And activated immune cells require a ton of energy. So you're taking energy away from your brain.
From defending itself, yeah.
From just having, having a great day energy.
So just having energy.
It's like a sink. Exactly. Just having energy. It's a sink. Low-grade inflammation. I mean, you were telling me this, we were chatting a little bit earlier about how you were eating this terrible diet back when you were doing your arena football, and you were always tired.
Always tired.
Low-grade inflammation, it's an energy sink because it requires so much energy to activate your immune cells. And there's only so much energy. It's like a triage, right? It's triaging there.
It's taking it somewhere else. And it takes you away from your mission, from your vision of your life, from your career, from your energy with your family, your friends.
Yeah, you have to have energy. I mean, it takes motivation to want to go to the gym. It takes motivation also to want to like do stuff or to talk to people, Is there a genetic thing or DNA thing that holds someone back from losing that weight if they've tried for years? Or is this still, they're just lacking the discipline? What is that? There's absolutely many genes that regulate obesity, and I'll just tell you, my mother-in-law, she is also not obese. She's has in the past had an overweight problem and has tried. I mean, she's the kind of person that tries and goes all in, and she has tried every diet, just everything, and just nothing seemed to work. So, I mean,
how does someone like that, if they've tried, and it's just like, you know what, I'm beating myself up, the diets I'm trying, the exercise is not working, what do they need to shift?
Well, you asked about genetics, and there is a really important role for genetics as well. But I think that in order to know that, you're going to have to measure biomarkers in your blood. So you're going to have to measure lipids like your LDL cholesterol, different particle sizes of those cholesterol, inflammatory biomarkers like high sensitivity reactive protein, your triglycerides, your HbA1c, which is a long-term measure of your long-term blood glucose levels. Measure those things. And also you can get a genetic test. There's a variety of genetic testing services out there, 23andMe, Ancestry DNA. I do have a genetic report that basically we look exclusively or looking at genes that are basically interacting with diet. So people that are eating a high protein diet, some people with a certain SNP, which is one change in one nucleotide of DNA in a gene, basically can gain more weight. And the opposite is true, like I mentioned, or eating the ratio of saturated fat to polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat. So saturated fats found in foods like dairy, red meat, fatty cuts of red meat, polyunsaturated fats found in fish, monounsaturated fat is found in olive oil, olives, nuts. So these things, like even the ratio of those things can affect, depending on someone's genetics, their ability to gain or lose weight.
But
and more so, like even people, there's some people have it where they eat a high carbohydrate diet and they gain more weight.
So so it's not as simple as what I'm hearing you say as just eat less calories a day and you should lose weight.
Not always.
If you suppress the calorie intake, you're going to burn more, and eventually you're going to burn,
I think that's the one thing that's pretty tried and true, is that your caloric restriction, most of the time people will, lose weight.
Lose weight. Gotcha.
They will.
Okay.
But, the question is, how sustainable is that? So what you would need to do, the other thing is that a lot of times obesity, there's a dysregulation in hormones. Mm-hmm. Hormones like insulin, leptin is another big one. Yeah. And you have to reset those hormones in order to have a normal biology. Yes. And sometimes resetting those hormones takes a reset that's kind of a strong stressor. Like like a long fast, a long fast, you know, where you're basically resetting those things. And that's what did it for my mother-in-law. So that was my long story.
She did a long fast and helped her reset.
A couple of them. So she did. Now, by the way, you know, when I say a long fast, typically intermittent fasting is anything less than 48 hours. A longer fast would be longer than 48 hours.
3
than 2 days.
plus days.
Yeah. No, she did the first time she did a 3-day. She started out by doing sort of a caloric restriction, low calorie diet just to kind of get her into it. And then she did a 3-day fast where she didn't eat anything, a little bit of salt. She would take a little bit of salt in and drink some water. And then she did 4 days. And she did this like, you know, separated by like a month. And that reset her metabolism. And all of a sudden she started losing weight. You know,
wow.
And this has also been the case for a few other friends of mine, particularly one that was morbidly obese, and he lost like 180 pounds.
When was the moment for you? Because I'm sure you were probably thinking for a long time, like, I should probably lose some weight, right? I should probably start eating healthier. When was the moment that was the make or break moment for you? That you said, enough is enough, or never again, or I got to start this journey the real way, like I'm going all in. When was that moment?
There was a period in 2002. I had fallen in love with this girl when I was 16, and we were really, really good friends. She says we were best friends, and she had zero interest in me romantically.
You were in the friend zone.
I was in the friend zone.
Yeah.
Fine.
16 years old.
16 years old.
What was your weight like then?
I was heavy, but I wasn't quite as heavy as
200, 250, 300.
You know, I wasn't, even then, it's like I wasn't getting on scales often.
Right.
I certainly wasn't 500 pounds. I actually have a picture of us from when we were 16 and we were hanging out. And I'm a heavy guy, but I'm not morbidly obese.
Yeah.
We became romantic in 2002, and there was just a moment where I was like, oh, if I'm gonna make this work, if this really has a shot at longevity, I gotta change, because she likes to do stuff like take a hike and spend the day at the beach and go to museums. And I can't do that, you know? So that was kind of it. It was like, I want to have this relationship with her, so I must change. It was a bizarre kind of counterintuitive conversation that I had with her too, because having it, I was scared, like, if I have this conversation, she'll know that I'm overweight, like that I'm obese. As if
she didn't know.
As if she didn't know. It was like this thing, if I show her that this is something I want to change, not just like this masculine thing of like I'm showing weakness, it wasn't that. It was, this is the hardest, this thing is so unconfrontable, I never think about it. I push it away. It's almost become something subconscious. So if I bring it to the forefront and I say, let's address this, that's a very scary and narrow path to walk, because failure, I figure life is failure at that point, you know?
Yeah. So that was 2002. Did you start going all in? Was it dabbling a little bit and kind of lost weight, went back off the wagon? What was that like for the next 18 years till now?
I went all in, and I'm a sober guy too, so I went all in a very, in a similar fashion to achieving sobriety, which was admit that I'm powerless and turn my problem over to somebody else and go like, I am incapable of figuring this out right now. I'm going to do exactly what you say until we get to the point that I can take over. And she was like, great, here's what you're going to do. I've went and found a guy who has a liquid diet. You can do it for up to 2 months. Why don't you do that? You don't have to do it for 2 months. You could do it for 1 month. You could do it for 2. Let's see how this goes. And I crushed that.
2 months liquid diet.
80 pounds.
Wow.
2 months.
This is not like drinking Cokes all day liquid diet. This is no sugar liquid diet.
This is like, I mean, the calories were so low. It was like 3 weird protein shakes with some green powder and a ton of supplements that were, I think, mostly fiber and some vitamins, and as much water as I could drink, and that's it.
80 pounds, 2 months.
80 pounds.
But that's still in the 400 zone.
Yeah, but
you must
I
have
will
seen
say this. Of all the weight I've gained and lost, I never dipped back into those 80 pounds. Never once. So it was such a prize that I've never gotten close to like back into that zone. And I followed that up with, I don't even know what the diet's called. It might have been like a blood type diet or something. And it was kind of on that where I realized like, well, I'm gonna have to try different diets. And I tried basically every diet that exists.
What worked the best for you?
The easiest thing was keto.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't have to think about anything.
You eat lots of meat, it just eliminates certain things, and eat as kind of as much as you want of other stuff, right?
Yeah, and and that worked to a degree. As I had less and less weight to lose, I found that I had to like mess around with what I was eating. Because when I first started, it was like, you can eat bacon and Swiss cheese all day long. Like, okay, well, that's easy. And I would, and I'd lose weight, and I'd be like, this is a magical diet. And I'm putting mayonnaise on everything, and I'm losing weight. How is this possible? My little salad would have 4 cups of salad dressing on it, and, no sugar, but like a ton of fat. Yeah. And that did work. And I was able to do it, and it was super easy for traveling. You just rip the bread off stuff and eat steaks, and it's actually, I think, designed to be easy to get around the world and eat this way. Once I got really close to, there were 2 periods. There was a period in 2012 where I was super into cycling, and I got really lean, much smaller than I am
190
now.
or something, or one?
I was just about 200, but that's tiny for me. And you think about 200, that's still, you're a big dude, but that was really, really small for me. And I just noticed that if I was eating only fat, I was suffering on the bicycle. Like, I wasn't as efficient on the bicycle. So some sugars, gels,
carbs,
some carbs entered my diet, and like I would fly up hills, which was really cool. Then I had a bad accident. My wife told me that I wasn't ever gonna make a living riding a bike. I thought we were rich and that I could retire and just ride my bike at like 35 years old forever. That was not the case. She said I had to go work again. So I went back to acting, and the bike kind of fell away, and I started doing like CrossFit and rowing machines. I could crush a full marathon on a rowing machine, no problem. And then at some point I was kind of having trouble finding work, and kept hearing like, well, you're not the big guy, the heavy, lovable guy anymore. So there was a point where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna eat and lift weights and see what happens. And I ate whatever I wanted for about a year and lifted weights and got pretty near 400 pounds again.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you gained 200 pounds within a year.
Yeah.
Close.
Well, no, it was really from like 2003 years. It was 3 years. Yeah. 2013.
Now,
to
how long did you pause from acting?
2010, and pause is not quite the right word. I did a few pilots that didn't get picked up.
Sure.
But I was putting no effort into it. It was like if they called me and said, please come do our pilot, I would do it.
Right.
But
you're
I
not going on auditions, you're not.
No. I was really just riding my bike.
When you've been in, how many movies you've been in? And TV shows?
I've never counted. I actually have no
50
idea.
plus, you think?
Yeah.
At least, right?
Yeah.
When you've been in that many movies or shows, do you have to audition anymore?
Yeah, sure.
You still have to audition?
Yeah, definitely.
Really? Even if they've seen all your work, they know what you can do?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of the director wanting to see if you're exactly what he wants for this specific project, or now that I'm physically different, what is that going to look like, But yeah, I still have to audition.
What was when you look back, what do you think the thing is that drew you to eating as a bad habit, or an addiction, or a mind-numbing process that was a part of your life for so long? Was there a number of events? Was there moments? Was there something that connected you to that?
I've tried to do like self psychoanalysis on this, and I get to a point where I'm 5 years old. I go to visit my grandparents in Vermont, and their reaction to me. And if I look at a picture of myself as at 5 years old today, I see just like a normal, healthy kid with maybe some chubby cheeks, right? Their reaction to me was like, oh my God, what are your parents doing to you? You have gone to crap, right? This is out of hand. We need to get this under control. And my favorite food was lasagna, which my grandpa would always make me. Yeah, and he had it cooking. As I arrived, I could smell it. And I'm there visiting them for the first time without my mom or dad in Vermont, like super excited. Their reaction is this, and then they basically were like, you can't have a second helping of lasagna. So in that day was the first time that I snuck food, and it was clearing the table and eating food off their plates.
At the same time, like clearing it and like...
Yeah, just stuffing in a few bites because I was not allowed to, like, I reached for a second helping and got my hand patted, like, no.
At 5.
Yeah, that's off limits. You eat what we tell you to do. And then the next day, they weighed me first thing in the morning, which I'd never been on a scale before, and I'm being weighed. And then it was like, okay, we're going on a 1 mile walk that is for your benefit. And this did a number of things. It developed the sneaking food habit. It developed the habit of wanting to eat privately, and the idea that people witnessing me eating was not good. And it also created a weird barrier to me just naturally wanting to be outside and active, because at 5 I was very active, running around. But when it was enforced, when it was this point of like
a punishment almost.
Yeah, we're not consulting how willing you are to do this. We're not saying, is there something you'd like to do outside? We're saying you must go march on this. It was like a mile to their mailbox and a mile back. And like, this is not for fun. This is for because you have gotten so overweight. That really pushed the idea of physical activity into another punishment type thing where I just didn't want to do it anymore. So it was kind of this wild confluence of new mental structures that I built where it was like, well, I'm going to sneak food now and I'm going to not do activities.
How insecure were you about your weight when you got older and started recognizing it, or seeing maybe someone make fun of you, or realizing like, oh, I can't go on a hike with my girlfriend or my friends and do these certain activities? Did you feel insecure about it ever, or was it more of just, this is who you are?
I definitely felt insecure about it. I also got into a lot of fights as a kid and was like, you know, there were a few times in elementary school where like some preschooler would say like, wow, look how fat he is. And that obviously wasn't going to fight a little preschooler. And you come to learn like, well, avoid little kids at all costs, because they just say, they see something and they just talk about it. And that made me terribly uncomfortable. But if like another 10-year-old said something like that to me, we would just have a fight. And then people would know like, oh, he's like not a nice guy in that circumstance.
Yeah.
We're not going to say that to him, you know?
Yeah. So how did you get into acting and being such a successful actor while also having this kind of insecurity, or knew that you stood out in a different way than most of the other actors in Hollywood?
There was like, in school, I didn't really like school either. I grew to really dislike anything done from a point of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
I just was not for me. So if it's like you're going on a diet, or you have to do sports, or you have to study, I was not into it. Which is really bizarre, because now I love nothing more than a diet I find for myself, and studying something I'm interested in, and finding a sport to be interested. Like I can become obsessive about these things and do them 110% if it's my own determination. But from a point of authority, it just didn't fly. And I noticed a couple of things. I was never like a class clown, but we had an actor in my school, And so much more attention was paid to the fact that he was an actor than any of his physical attributes, any of his other accomplishments in school. It was like this distraction, this like, here's who this person is, but like, here's this weird identity that actually has nothing to do with him, that we're all gonna focus on that. And there was something kind of magical about that. Like, I can't like kill people with jokes. That's just not what I do. But what if I had that too? What
not
if
super sexy and attractive.
I'm
with
not
a
going to do
six-pack.
any. Yeah. But I could create this other identity that would distract people from how fat I am and talking about that, or poking fun at me, or even wanting to talk to me about it. Because like, I'll just show them this. What if I do this? So there was, and it got you out of school. Because this dude would leave school for weeks at a time and go hang out on sets, and like, guess what's on a set? Craft services on a set. And
free food all day.
And you got a trailer, like you can fill your pockets with food and go back to your trailer and eat it. Like, it's this wonderful place. It was like
unlimited food supply.
Oh my God. And then there was also like always gonna be like some grip who had a prescription to Percocet that you could like give a wink to, and you know, like and by the way, it always started legitimately. Like, my feet hurt, my ankles and my knees hurt. Like, these are real things.
You're on set 18 hours a day. You're doing this over and over.
Like, none of it is just irrational. It's all irrational, but it's also very easily rationalized.
Body really exists in sort of one of two states. You're either in the fed state or you're in the fasted state. Okay, so when you're in the fed state, you're eating, insulin is going up. And as insulin goes up, its job, like its normal job, is to tell your body to store those calories. Okay, so you can store it as glycogen, which is sugar, or it can store it as body fat. But that's the point. So you eat lunch or dinner, there's way more calories in that meal than you can use right at that point. So you want to store that. So when you don't eat, which is any time you don't eat is called fasting. So when you fast, that means your insulin is going to drop, and that's the signal for your body to now start pulling those calories out of storage, right? And that's the reason you don't die in your sleep every single night, is because we have the ability to hold some of those calories in storage. So in the fed state, insulin goes up, you're storing calories or body fat. In the fasted state, you're not eating, your insulin's dropping, and you're using calories. So you're in one or the other. You can't do both at the same time. So if now you say, okay,
when I'm eating, I'm storing. I'm not using calories. Is that right? Every time I eat, I will store. I'm not burning body fat.
You're not burning body fat because you're putting in sugar, for example, and that sugar is going to signal that, hey, sugar's coming in, use the sugar that's coming in.
Don't burn anything off my body. Yeah,
exactly.
Keep all that stored fat. Keep it. Just keep piling it on, right?
Exactly. So the only way that you can actually use the body fat is to let the insulin fall and not eat. So if you are now eating constantly, so the minute you get up, somebody tells you, oh, you have to eat, you can't skip breakfast, blah, 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 and then you have to snack all day long. So now if you look at studies, the average duration of how long people eat for is about 14 hours and 45 minutes. That's the average. So if you start eating at 8 a.m., you don't stop till 10:45 p.m. That's on average. That's the average.
14 hours, you mean a 14-hour span of eating from the start to finish, right? You may not be eating every moment, but you're eating every few hours within a 14-hour window.
It takes about 4 hours for you to switch over into the fasted state. So the point is that before, where you'd eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, and by 6 o'clock you're done, boom, now you shift into using those calories, and your mom you say, oh, you need time to digest, right? That's what she sort of said. But the point was that you need to start using those calories that you stored up during your meal times. And that was the secret, that they could stay relatively slim. Now, if you're eating constantly, then you never give your body a chance to switch over into that fasted state and start using those calories. And the problem, of course, is that insulin stays high, which tends to keep your body storing calories. Your body, so the high insulin, for example, blocks fat burning. You can't burn your fat stores because your body's like, the instructions that I'm getting is to store energy, not use energy. I want to keep my stored energy for when there's a time that there's no food. The problem, of course, is that there's never a time there's no food, right? Every day is the same thing, right? 14 hours of eating and no time of not eating. And that's the point. So now if you understand the problem, you can say, well, how am I going to change this? Well, it's simple. Increase the amount of time that you're not eating. And that's all intermittent fasting is. If you eat one meal a day, for example, or if you eat within a 8-hour window or a 4-hour window or whatever, what you're doing is you're simply allowing your body to use the calories that have been stored, which is body fat predominantly. But that is precisely the reason you carry body fat. Like, that body fat is not there for looks. It's there for you to use, right? And that's the whole point. What's so bad about using it? If you don't eat, you're going to burn it. Well, so again, go back to the 70s and everybody says, oh, you can't fast, you can't fast. Well, they're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner. And if you're a naughty boy, you got sent to bed without dinner. So now you went from 12 o'clock to 8 a.m., 20 hours.
You look good the next day. You're looking clean. You got a 6-pack. It's burning fat.
Exactly. And nobody died. Nothing bad happens, right? There was nothing wrong with that. And hopefully you learned your lesson too, right? And that's the whole point, is that there's nothing wrong. It's a natural part of our human physiology. If we couldn't survive without eating, like, we would not be here today, because when we were cavemen and cavewomen, we didn't have food every day. Yeah, exactly. They couldn't. There might be a stretch of 3, 4, 5 days where there was no food, and therefore they had to survive on their own body fat, which they did, and that was the whole point. So let's let our body, use it, because that's the most natural thing to do.
What's the process for you? Your day-to-day life? Do you eat 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day? Do you fast every month for a day? Are you always doing intermittent fasting? Is there a downside to intermittent fasting? What's your process?
Yeah, I usually do a lot of I rarely eat breakfast. And I'll tell you that it didn't come, I started this in medical school, and that was mostly because I really wanted to just roll out of bed and go, I'd wake up literally 5 minutes before I left the door. I brushed my teeth, put on some clothes, and rolled out the door. I was, it's just that the way I was, right? And so I don't eat breakfast now, because again, people say you have to eat breakfast, but there's actually nothing magical about breakfast. If you don't eat breakfast, what's going to happen? Well, my body, which is now burning fat because I've had 8 hours of sleep, it's gone into sort of fat burning mode, because that's the storage form of calories, or it's burning sugar. It's just going to keep doing it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. So a lot of times I try and confine myself to sort of an eating window of sort of 6 to 8 hours. And then once in a while, when I get very busy, I will do a 24-hour fast, which is a 1 meal a day. And then every so often, I'll do a longer fast. And the longer fasts are actually not as bad as you might think, but they really disrupt your schedule sort of socially. It's a tough one, because a lot of our socialization happens at meals. So I often have dinner with my family, for example, and doing those longer fasts is really, really disruptive to that sort of thing, which is why when you look at traditional societies, like if you look at, say, during major religions, for example, there would be a period of fasting that's sort of universal. So,
everyone's doing it, so no one's feeling
exactly because
stressed when they smell the food and they're like,
Exactly. So if it's like Good Friday, or during Lent, or during Ramadan for Muslims, or during Yom Kippur for Jews, or whatever, everybody's fasting. So it's actually terrifically easy, because you're not disrupting the sort of social fabric of your life there. Whereas nowadays, if you fast, and I've done this, it's just really hard to do. It's not physically, it's not hard, but it's hard. And I do it mostly, when I've gained a bit of weight, usually after the holidays and after a vacation, I will sort of schedule a longer fast right after, because I know that I can lose that weight very quickly. But that means I can enjoy myself. Like a couple of years ago, I went on a cruise and really ate too much. Just a lot. I had a lot, and I knew it, and I could feel it in my pants were tight and stuff. So I did sort of a 3 or 4 day fast. And I'll tell you, by the next week, I was back to my normal weight. Well, that's great, because a week, but I got to enjoy the whole week prior where I really didn't look at what I was eating or how often I was eating or anything. I was like, "Yeah, this is my vacation. I'm doing this." But at the same time, I know, hey, I've got this next, after this week, the week after, very little to eat. And it gives you a great tool to use if you need it, right?
Yeah, it's almost like either every day don't indulge and balance and create a schedule where you're only eating in a certain window of time, whether it be 4, 6, 8 hours, which I'm hearing is kind of the which would be a great standard to have, between 4 and 8 hours of a feeding time. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, if you want to lose weight, you can do very well, of course, with a sort of standard 70s style, sort of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., which in a 14-hour fast every single night. Remember, they're doing 12 to 14 hours, say, every single night without even thinking about it. Like, that's a secret, because they don't even think about that. That's just a period of time that they're not eating, right? But now, of course, the traditions are different. You can eat anywhere you want. You can eat in the theater. You can eat at your desk. You can eat in a car. Like in the 70s, stuff like that didn't exist. You didn't eat in a meeting in a boardroom, for example. Now you go to a meeting in a boardroom when
there's
this
food
used to
everywhere. There's
happen,
donuts. There's
donuts and cookies, right? Somebody's ordered a plate of bagels or something like that, right? It's like, well, why? We're having a meeting here, right? So that's the thing. So you could do very well with that kind of 8-hour eating window, 10-hour eating window. You can do very well with it. But if you're not doing well, then you can extend it, and that's the beauty of it. You could extend it as much as you want. Right. So if you think about fasting, you could go 3 days, you could go 5 days, you could go 30 days. People do that all the time. But
no food.
No food. Yeah. So if you think about fasting, so the amount of energy that you need. So a pound of fat has 3,500 calories roughly. If you need about 1,800 calories, so that's for like a regular person, not like an athlete or somebody who's working out a lot. It takes about half a pound of fat per day. So if you're dealing with a lot of obese people, like 100 pounds overweight, you could go 200 days. If you want to lose 100 pounds, you could go 200 days without eating before you get into
survive.
trouble. And survive. Exactly.
And be okay.
Exactly. Be perfectly fine, because this is a very efficient, fat is an efficient store of calories. Right? It's very efficient. That's why we developed it.
It's to keep you alive when there's no food around.
Exactly. So use it.
Does it affect your digestive system? Does it mess with your metabolism if you don't eat after a certain amount of time?
Yeah.
And what happens when you start eating again? Does that affect your stomach, your intestines, your colon, your metabolism?
Yeah.
What's affected there?
And this is the interesting part, is that everybody thinks that fasting is like the worst thing you could do. When you actually look at the science of what happens during fasting, it's actually one of the best things you can do for yourself from both a mental standpoint and a physiologic standpoint. Assuming, of course, you're not malnourished, right? I mean, I'm assuming if you're the average American who's, 10, 20, 30 pounds overweight, then this is something that actually has a lot of benefits. So there's a lot of sort of myths around it. One is that you're going to burn a lot of muscle. And the truth is that you don't. I mean, when if your body stores energy as body fat. So people say, oh, you're going to burn muscle. It's like, well, you've got to think that our body is so stupid that it stores energy as fat, but the minute you need it, it starts burning muscle, right? Like, why would our body be so stupid? And if it were so stupid, how did we survive, right? And it's like, if you save firewood all winter for the winter, and then as soon as it gets cold, you chop up your sofa and throw it into the fire. It's like, why would you be so stupid, right? Our body's just the same. It's not that. So, and I know, and everybody knows that the way that you build muscle is that you exercise, right? So if you have, lift heavy weights, then your muscles become stronger. It doesn't become stronger because you eat, right? That does nothing for building muscle. Like, otherwise we'd be, the strongest nation on earth, right? But we're not. We're the fattest nation on earth. So that's the whole problem, right? I mean, you're confusing two completely different things. There is a point during fasting where there is a little bit of protein breakdown, and that's where people get very confused and say, well, you're burning muscle, but you're not. Protein is not the same as muscle. So our body has all kinds of protein, including all the connective tissue, like the skin and stuff that holds stuff in place. And some of that is often burned off. So for example, when you look at those shows where people get surgery and they lose 150 pounds, they get all this flappy skin. That's not excess fat, that's excess protein. So that's, it's functional tissue that you've never used up. So we actually see very little of that problem when people fast, because there's a small period of time where they're actually using up the protein. Your body will maintain its musculature based on what exercise and stuff you're using. So another big myth, so muscle burning is one thing. The other big myth is people talk about is starvation mode or metabolic rate. So metabolic rate is the amount of energy that your body uses in a day, the number of calories you burn in a day. And this is what we see if you simply cut calories. So this is a standard medical advice. Cut 500 calories a day and you'll lose a pound of fat a week. What happens, of course, is that you cut 500 calories a day, and then your body quickly reduces the amount of calories it uses by about 500 calories. So now you're actually not losing any weight. That's what happens all the time, because
why does it stop? Why does it stop burning those calories?
Well, it stops burning the calories by reducing its metabolic rate. So the metabolic rate is the energy that your body uses to, say, generate body heat, your liver, your kidney, your heart, and so on. And we've known this for 100 years, that if you simply restrict the number of calories but keep the foods very similar, what happens is that your body is going to start using less. So because it doesn't like running a deficit, right? It's just like if you normally make $100,000 a year and you spend $100,000 a year, now you make 50,000. You don't keep spending 100, right? You're gonna get thrown into jail. But so you reduce your expenditure, same as a body. So it's getting less, so it's going to use less, and that's the natural reaction. It's important because it's a survival response. It cannot do anything different.
It's almost like you need to be extreme in your use in order for it to burn and kill off these cells that might be harmful to you. But if you just do a little bit, I'm going to eat a little bit less today, it's not going to do that much.
It doesn't work. And people assume that if you go to zero, which is fasting, say you fast for a full day, you have 0 calories, you don't die, right? Because what happens is completely different. Now you've lowered your insulin, so you're changing the hormonal profile of the body. And as you do that, you're now switching fuel sources. So instead of using food as your fuel, you're switching it into body fat. Just like those hybrid cars where you go from gas to electric, right? So it's using food, and then boom, it goes, okay, I have no food coming in. I need to switch over now into body fat. And then it goes, whoa, I have like 500,000 calories of body fat here. So why do I need to cut it down? And the point is that it doesn't, because assuming if you have no body fat, of course, it's a problem. But for people who have adequate stores of body fat, which is most of us, and truthfully, most people do it for weight loss, too much body fat, then what happens is that there's so much there. Why wouldn't you use it? Because it's a fuel source. That's all it is. That's the way you have to look at the body fat. If you're eating all the time, you can never use your body fat, because your insulin's here, your insulin's high, you're using food. Then you get hungry, so you eat some more, right? You have a snack, you have a low-fat muffin, you stay here. You can only burn food. All that stuff over there, those 500,000 calories of body fat, are completely inaccessible for your body. So if you simply dial it down like this and say, okay, instead of 2,000 calories, I'm going to eat 1,500, but I'm going to eat 10 times a day, keeping myself here. Now you only have 1,500 coming in. You can only burn 1,500. You can't access that. If you go to 0, you go boom, and then your body burns the full 2,000. So they did a study, for example, where they took people and fasted them for 4 days and measured how many calories they're using. They also measured their VO2, which, as you know, is something that it's a measure of how much cellular work your body is doing. And what they found, so they measured the metabolic rate at time 0, then they measured it at 4 days of 0 food. And they were burning 10% more calories than they were per day than they were when they were eating. The VO2 was 10% higher. You're doing more work. Your body is actually not shutting down. It's revving itself up. And again, there's a good physiologic reason for that. And we know that when insulin goes down, when you switch yourself into this sort of, mode that you're burning fat, other hormones go up, including your sympathetic nervous system, which is your noradrenaline. So you're actually pumping your body up. The reason for that is sort of, again, it's a survival response. So imagine, again, we're cavemen and it's winter and there's no food. So if you don't eat for 2 days and you get weaker, you're never
You
going to
die.
eat again.
Yeah.
You're going to die because every day is going to be harder. You're going to circle the drain. So our body's just not that stupid, right? So what they do is that your body says, okay, there's no food coming in. Boom, I'm going to switch you over to body fat, and then I'm going to pump you up so that you have energy. You go out there, you go kill that woolly mammoth.
You're
right?
focused, you're clear,
Focused.
you're in the zone, everything.
Exactly. And that's the reason that we actually pump ourselves up. And the mental aspects is actually fascinating because people also say, well, I have to eat because I have to concentrate. It's like your concentration is actually much higher when you don't eat. Think about when you had a huge Thanksgiving meal. Well, were you really sharp or did you really want to just lie down on the sofa and watch some football, right? You don't have any sort of focus. But if you think about animals, it's the same thing. Lions, they just eat, they just like lounging around. But if you're the hungry wolf, that is a very dangerous animal because he's focused, he's ready to kill you. Same thing for us. Our level of concentration and our mental ability, mental agility goes up significantly when we're hungry. Like if you think, oh, you're hungry for this, hungry for that, that doesn't mean you're falling down lethargic. It means you're focused. So it's interesting because there was this book a few years ago called Unbroken, which is a biography of this fellow who went to a prisoner of war camp in World War II Japan. And he was talking about starvation, and they were literally starving. Like they'd eat like almost nothing for the full day. And he's talking about how his other prisoners were doing these incredible mental feats. So one guy was reading a book entirely from memory. Another guy learned all of Norwegian in a week. And so the guy says, this is simply the mental clarity of starvation. So it was incredible. It's like, it was so widespread. Everybody was starving and they'd see these incredible feats that nobody else in the world could do all the time because your mental ability is ramped up to such a high degree. And then, in the ancient Greece, the ancient mathematician Pythagoras, he would require his students to fast in order to come to his class because otherwise he thought they had no mental agility.
100 years ago, we weren't eating as much sugar, I'm assuming, in processed foods.
It's not even close. It's not even close.
But what is with the life expectancy increases every year, it seems like. We're eating more and more bad things, but we're able to live longer, whereas before we weren't.
That's the misnomer, though. We're not necessarily living longer, we're dying longer.
We're getting sicker and being able to
and being
stay
able
alive.
Yes, it's very different. And this is the first generation. We are the first generation right now that is going to not outlive our generations before us. Right? This is the first time we're seeing this downtick. When we're supposed to be seeing folks, well, basically the life expectancy has gone down for the first time in like recent history. Yeah.
So we're saying we're not supposed to outlive our parents? Or what do you mean?
So we'll just say the life expectancy of the past generation was 80 years old. Now it's 79.
Really?
So it's just our life expectancy has gone down for the first time.
Previous generation, got you. It's interesting, I was asking Dr. David Sinclair about this.
I love him.
He was like, the goal is not to live as long as you can and be sick and miserable. He's like, I've seen that in too many people. The goal is to live as long as you can, healthy, flexible, abundant, not with chronic pain, and then die quickly.
Right.
To get sick and then die within a week. Not get sick and die within 20 years of misery. He's like, that's not a great life.
Yeah. We don't just want lifespan, we want health span. And it all really boils down, and this is the most beautiful part about this, and what I'm really hoping to impress upon culture, because when we tend to think of food, we tend to think of it in relationship. In our culture, we think of diet in relationship to weight. It's just like what's connected. When in reality, food is one of the greatest, if not the greatest determinant of what every single cell and organ system in your body is doing at all times. And this is what I really want to get across is, of course, I'm going to give you the best information possible on the metabolism connection with food, but also how does food affect your cognitive performance? And it's shocking when you find this data out, how deeply food impacts your levels of empathy and your ability to connect with other people. We'll break that down as well.
What are the foods that cultivate more empathy and compassion? And what are the
foods? Before we get to that, the fat storage, there was one more.
Were you talking about brown fat?
Yeah, brown fat.
And there was another fat?
Yeah, so there's one other fat. And so brown adipose tissue is very dense in mitochondria, right? So these energy power plants, that's why it's brown. Babies have a lot of brown fat. It's kind of an evolutionary adaptation advantage to prevent hypothermia, just to basically keep thermogenesis going. As you become an adult, you have a lot less brown adipose tissue. It's mostly located like around your collarbones, your shoulder blades, down your spine. And brown adipose tissue is remarkable in that it's really correlated. If you have enough brown adipose tissue, which you can create more, and the mobilization and activity of it is correlated with having a better body composition. So this type of fat is burning fat for you, if you know what
brown fat.
Yeah. All right, so we got 3 storage fats, and then we've got 2 other types of fat.
And that's body fat that burns fat.
Yes, and so this other one, and this is one a lot of folks might not know a lot about yet, is beige fat.
Is this the 5th type of fat?
Yeah, so this is beige fat.
Beige fat.
And so beige fat is really, really remarkable in that it can actually become brown fat or white fat. All right? Based on your lifestyle inputs and your nutrition can determine whether it's going to be turning into a fat storing type of fat or a fat burning type of fat. And the browning of this fat, one of the things, and I'll just throw this out there for folks since you asked about a specific food, when we go through so many different, but I'm going to throw one out that might sound a little bit crazy, a little controversial, is coffee. Coffee has been found to encourage your beige fat cells to become brown fat cells. And in fact, one of the studies that I cited in Eat Smarter found they actually used fMRI, and they looked at what was happening in the body when somebody drank coffee, and they saw the brown fat areas of the body actually light up, signaling increased thermogenesis. And one of the studies found that there's about a 3 to 11% increase in metabolic rate from having caffeine. Now, there's a U-shaped curve of benefits, right? Some is good. Once we get to a certain place, we can mess ourselves up. And also we get in the conversation of what is that coffee coming along with, right? Is it coffee, or are you consuming coffee with
donuts and crap?
And these coffee creamers with all these synthetic chemicals.
That is not good.
And even the coffee itself, are you getting a piping hot cup of coffee with pesticides and herbicides and rodenticides and these toxicants that damage these hormones related to fat loss and fat storage and create kind of dysbiosis in the gut? So there's a big conversation there, and we dive into all these pieces to see there's so many wonderful things that we have access to, but in our culture, we've been a little bit led astray. And it's not that coffee is inherently good or bad. It's been utilized by humans for centuries, but it's the quality and how you're going about it that can make all the difference.
And the quantity probably, and
Yeah, and so just going back to your original question, when we're targeting that, the belly fat specifically, and this is something that is not talked about enough. It's really about encouraging and optimizing the hormones related to fat storage and fat burning, right? And this gets into the conversation of calories, because we tend to be very calorie focused as far as we're trying to lose weight or we're trying to lose belly fat. And it's not that calories don't matter. I want to make that clear. I want to preface with this. But when I was in my nutritional science class in college, the king, the monarch, the warden of diet is calories. And I say warden intentionally because it gets into this kind of prisoner mentality.
Yeah.
And diets are really revolving around this. And I'm always asking this question, and I'm so grateful that I've kind of hardwired myself to do this. Where did it come from? Where the hell did this idea start? And so I went back and examined the entire history of calories. And it actually, for me, it's just like when we find Egyptian pyramids, they didn't have any shit about calories. Right. Nobody was even thinking about it or looking for it even when it was discovered. And it wasn't discovered and used for nutrition. It was discovered and utilized initially in physics and engineering. And and this was in 1800s. And then it made its transition into nutrition thanks to a guy named Wilbur Atwater. But he's just kind of a little side note as well. And I go back and talk about all the people involved, but this is what changed America. This is what changed the world, really, was a physician. She's a pioneer for sure. Her name was Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters. And she's the one who popularized the term calorie. And she sold, and this was back in the early 1900s, she created a nutrition book, a diet book, and it sold 2 million copies back then, which is basically everybody and their mother had this book. Right. All right. Now,
what was it called?
This was Diet and Health and the Key to Calories, something like that, the Key to Calories. But I went back and read these old fangled writings. There's like a lot of pieces of it online. And this began the indoctrination of our culture in starting to look at food in terms of numbers. It's no longer this dynamic, multifaceted entity that affects all of our hormones and neurotransmitters and organ systems. Now it's numbers. And she specifically said, we will no longer call a slice of bread a slice of bread. You won't say one slice of bread, you'll say 100 calories of bread. You will no longer say a slice of pie, you say 350 calories of pie. And so we stopped looking at food as food. We started this evolution and started looking at it as numbers. And she asserted that a woman of her height could eat whatever she wanted as long as she maintained 1,200 calorie intake. And now let me also make this clear. Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters battled with her weight for her lifetime, all right? And it's that term of like, teach what you want to learn kind of thing. Now, this is also crucial. And some people, this might tug at their heartstrings a little bit. This was also the beginning of this indoctrination, associating food with character, associating food with morality. And so she basically asserted that it's a character defect if you're not able to manage your weight. There's something wrong with you. And started to use terms like sin and punishment in relationship to food. And this was also during the time of like World War I, so food rationing was a big thing happening. Right. And she said, one of her quotes I put in the book, and I'm paraphrasing that, for every pang of hunger you feel, you should have a double joy knowing that you're saving the hunger pangs in a starving child or, you know, with soldiers and what. So she's basically saying this was also a massive change in our perception that hunger is related to weight loss. If you're hungry, you're doing it right. And this started to really change the psychology of dieting, right? And so calories began to become the king and the big focus. Now, I want to say this, calories matter for sure. It's a measurement of energy in food, just like a meter is a measure of energy in distance. But that meter is consistent. If we measured this room consistently, it's going to be the same meters.
Same distance.
However, calories
are different.
Completely ignore, when you're talking about a measurement of energy, it ignores the complexity of human digestion and human hormones and neurotransmitters and cellular function. It's going to be different every day, the calories that you consume and what effects it has on your body.
Because our hormones are changing, our bodies are changing, our timelines are changing. What we used to eat when we were 12 may not affect us now when we're 40 or 50.
Exactly. Let alone you versus another person. And this is where we get in these situations where a diet works for one person, but it doesn't work for someone else. And I'm sick of it, man.
Wow.
Because people keep thinking there's something wrong with them and they're not getting these very fundamental principles. And so folks can start to free themselves of this caloric prison. I can share, there's 5 really powerful metrics that are not examined. There's really 5 major things that control what calories do in your body.
What are those?
So if we think about, I keep mentioning hormones, but just to give a good analogy of what hormones are really biochemical messengers that help your cells, this cellular community that you have, this amazing cellular community, to communicate with each other. It's like metabolic DMs, right? It's like text messages, emails.
How many hormones do we have?
There's about 50.
50 different hormones.
Yeah, about 50.
Are hormones, what is a hormone? Is it a cell? Is it an organ? Is it a connecting point? What is it?
So the most important fundamental building block of our hormones are proteins. All right. So I want to really reiterate this, how important protein is, because it's needed to build your freaking hormones. All right.
Where are hormones stored?
All throughout your body. You know, so even like that fat organ that we talked about is making its own hormones. But there are hormones that are being produced and secreted by your pituitary gland. Your hypothalamus is like a master regulator of your hormonal system, your endocrine system. It's in your brain. And so one of the things we talk about in the book is this growing epidemic of neuroinflammation that is messing up people's hypothalamic function, that's screwing up what's happening downstream. Like your thyroid is on that HPA axis.
Is the thyroid here or something?
In your throat. In your throat. And so that's largely considered like the metabolic regulator, like your master gland associated with fat loss or fat storage. And it definitely plays a role. So these are all pieces in this web. Now, what's actually determining what these calories are doing, and so I gave a little preface of what our hormones are. So when we're talking about calories, these 5 things, and I'll give an analogy. I'll give like an acronym, the DM. All right, we're going to use that as our letters. So it goes down in the DM. You know what I'm talking about. So the first thing that's controlling what calories are doing, the T stands for the type of food itself, determines what the calories are doing in your body. And this is highlighted in this crazy study. And this was published in Food and Nutrition Research. Listen to this. This is freaking crazy. They went to find out what would happen with a meal of the same calories that's either a meal of whole foods or processed food. Same amount of calories.
Mm-hmm. So a bowl of cereal and some fruits and vegetables.
So what they did was they had sandwiches. And so one set of folks got the sandwich that was considered whole food sandwich, which was whole grain bread and cheddar cheese. The other folks received the processed food sandwich, which was white bread and cheese product. Right?
Oh no!
And that's Kraft. Yeah. Kraft slices.
That American
it's
cheese
not
tastes
legally,
so good.
They can't call it cheese. And so here's what happened after, and I love this study because they tracked the pathway of calorie burn, their metabolic rate, and what happened when they ate these 2 respective sandwiches. After they compiled the data, the folks, even though the calories were the same, the folks who consumed the processed food sandwich had a 50% reduction in calorie burn after eating that damn sandwich. 50% reduction.
Why is that?
Because the body, so this gets into some of the other things we'll talk about, but that the processed nature of those foods created some metabolic dysfunction and some confusion for your endocrine system.
Oh man.
And your nervous system and all these, the cellular community, that communication. So now the body is less apt to let go of that energy. It's confused, it's trying to hang on to it, all right? Now, what are most folks eating? Processed foods. All right, so it's literally changing the way their body even associates with calories. And they're trying to count these damn points and not understanding that the very nature of how their body's operating is skewed. So that's just the T. That's the type of food, all right? So the H is how the food is prepared. Has a massive impact on what the calories do in your body. So
you mean whether it's cooked, whether it's raw, whether it's stir fried, I don't know. Like
all of that.
Really?
Exactly, yes. So to give a good example, if you think about spinach, right? Spinach, a lot of folks, of course, consider it's a healthy food. Popeye was like knocking it down in a can. I don't know have you ever had spinach out of a can?
No.
It must have been tough times. But so spinach is this is a good one because these green leafy vegetables, there's nutrition that's locked inside the cell wall. Mm-hmm. And you have to basically crack open the cell wall to extract the calories and some of the nutrients. And as the spinach gets older, that's why there's baby spinach. Mm-hmm. And as the spinach gets more mature, the cell walls become harder to break into, all right? So just right off the bat, baby spinach versus the same quantity of mature spinach, you're gonna get more calories out of the baby spinach.
Is that better for you or?
This is not about better or worse right now. This is just like understanding there's some other stuff happening.
Interesting, okay.
Now, but here's another thing. Cooking the spinach too breaks down the cell wall. So regardless if it's a baby spinach, cooked spinach, a mature spinach. And when this happens, it also, the density of the spinach, like you've seen it, you can-
Shrinks, a whole bag.
Comes this little teeny baby teaspoon, right? And so this is one of the things, and I really start the book talking about this, that most experts will agree that it was our ability to cook that really created like a quantum leap in the evolution of the human brain, because we're now able to extract more nutrients and calories from our food, even though this term wasn't invented yet. Not to say that it's good or bad or that raw food isn't good. It's just understanding how the food is prepared changes what calories do in your body.
Interesting. So if you're cooking spinach, it has less calories in it.
If you're cooking spinach, calories become more available.
So what does that mean? When you consume it, your body's consuming more calories?
It's able to extract more of the calories when it's cooked.
So if it's raw, it's got less calories, a little bit less.
Less that you can extract from it. In general, these are minutia. Yeah. These are small things, but they matter. So this gets into the conversation of what food is. And so even when we talk about calories, the way that this was initially kind of brought to the forefront, they used something called a bomb calorimeter, all right, a bomb calorimeter. And what they do is they took the food and they put it into a box, and they put that box into another box that's filled with water. And then they would burn the food with electrical energy to find out all of the available calories that were in this food that was used to heat the water up. And so once they did this, they were like, okay, there's 200 calories in this particular food product. The problem is you might be the bomb, Lewis, but you're not a bomb calorimeter, all right? Your body is very different. There are indigestible components of that food, for example, whereas the bomb calorimeter is basically saying all the calories that are here when you don't absorb all the calories from the food that you eat, okay? So this creates this schism, all right? So those indigestible components they're gonna be more in raw spinach. You're not gonna digest as much.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna digest as much and you're not gonna pull as many calories in. However, there's bioavailable micronutrients that you're gonna get. It's not that raw spinach versus cooked spinach is good or bad. It's just there's different ways that it impacts your body.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So that's how the food is prepared.
Types
So
of food, how it's prepared.
Right, so the DM, it goes down in the DM, all right? The next one is the E, and the E stands for energy exchange. Now this one here, this is something folks might have learned about a little bit in school. I know I did in my university class. However, I don't think we really get this. It costs energy, it costs calories to digest calories. Your body uses calories to digest calories.
To burn or digest the calories.
To produce the
Chew,
the saliva, to chew, to swallow,
to the intestinal wall,
Yeah.
like everything, right?
to
It's
churn the
processing.
stuff, to produce stomach acid, to move it, to take the food from your gastrointestinal tract through your small intestine and move it through into your bloodstream and move those cells, those nutrients to your brain, to your eyeballs, to your toes.
How much do we burn from one meal? From eating, chewing, to eliminating? How long does that take typically? Is that a 12 or 24-hour window
It depends,
from one meal?
man. That's such a very diverse question because it depends on the type of food. It depends on, matter of fact, we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
We'll get to that. So
Energy exchange.
yeah, energy exchange. Now this energy exchange, how many calories or how much the caloric expense is in digesting food depends on the type of food too. The macronutrients specifically is what people know about, but it's a little bit more
If
diverse.
it's processed food, it's going to be harder to digest. It's going to be more work or less work.
It depends on the type of food.
Got it.
But we'll stick with the overarching because we could do the whole show just on that one topic. But just on the macronutrient side,
Okay.
proteins are well noted to be more calorically expensive to digest. It costs you about 20 to 30% of the protein that you eat is the calories in there are used to digest the protein. So we'll just say if you consume 100 grams of protein, 100 calories of protein, 20 to 30 calories are used to digest that protein.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Right? So you get a net profit of calories of 70, all right?
So you can have more calories and realize it's going to be less that you're actually
Yeah, with
consuming.
protein.
Interesting.
With protein. With carbohydrates, it's going to cost you, it's about 10 to 15% of that energy that you take in, caloric energy is used to digest it. For fats, it's about 0 to somewhere in the ballpark about 5% to digest it. All
So
right?
more protein equals more burning
This
of
thermic,
calories.
it's called the thermic effect of food. All right. And protein is largely kept out of the conversation today. It's people are battling about carbs and fats.
Right.
These are the big diet frameworks. And protein is like Rodney Dangerfield. It's like, I get no respect. You know what I mean? It's just like, so it was so fascinating because I think too in our culture, we believe that most Americans are just eating a ton of protein. When the data actually shows something very different. There are populations that are eating a very high amount of protein, but the quality of their protein too is a problem. And then but there's a large portion of our society that's not eating enough protein. Not even near.
What are
where
they just
need to
eating?
be.
Sugar and carbs?
Yeah, because we've replaced so many things in food with more sugar, So the thermic effect of food, this is not taken into consideration. This does not show up on your product label. And just to give people a food tip here, one of them is almonds. Almonds is a really great example. And there was actually a study that was done and they was looking at basically saying there's a discrepancy in the Atwater system of caloric. So what you see on the back of a product label, companies are not using a bomb calorimeter anymore to measure calories in their food. They're just doing some math.
Right.
All right. They're just like, okay, there's 4 calories per gram of protein, right? And they're just doing some math. All right. So that's the Atwater system. But what they found was that even though it might be 170 calories of almonds you're consuming, that's on the product label, in actuality, you only get a net caloric intake of 129 of those calories. All right.
Say it one more time. On the
170
label?
calories you're consuming of
label.
almonds.
Yeah.
You're only netting, you're actually only getting 129.
Because you're burning.
Yeah.
The other.
There's energy being used. There's a thermic effect of food, right? So almonds are great.
Now, is that true for everyone, or is that based on your hormones and your metabolic rate?
That gets to the next one. All right. So the THE, so it's going down in the DM. All right. The DM. So the D is digestive efficiency. All right. Digestive efficiency. And this leans into the conversation of your unique metabolic fingerprint. All right. Every single human being is incredibly unique in what their metabolism and their digestion is doing. There's never been a digestion like you before in human history. There will never be after. And you are not even the same today as you'll be tomorrow.
Exactly.
It is always fluid and changing. And the problem is we think that we put ourselves in this box. Even a diet might work for us for a year, and then all of a sudden we're doing the same things and it stops working. And we blame us. It's like, no, I just need to paleo harder. I need to keto harder. I need to vegan harder.
Count calories more.
Yeah. And these are great frameworks, but we don't want them to imprison us because we change. Our bodies are continuously changing and evolving. Not to say that any of those aren't wonderful. And Eat Smart is really a unifier of whatever diet framework you want to go with. I support that. But there are principles that apply for success in all of them. So digestive efficiency means your ability to produce stomach acid is one factor of that. Your enzyme production, like folks that produce lactase, the enzyme that can break down lactose, right? Milk sugar. About 75% of the population don't produce adequate amounts, if any, of lactase enzyme. So they're not digesting. Right. And so they're not extracting as many calories from it. Not that that's a good thing though, because your bacteria in your body are gonna go crazy if you're not digesting it properly. Thus, running off to the bathroom, because you don't know if you have to fart or whatever, you know what I mean? And you're not fun to be around if you're lactose intolerant. Like you have a, extreme case of that and you're like down in some milk, you're on the gallon a day diet, right? So these are all factors that influence your digestive efficiency. And also for you, for example, your gastrointestinal tract is probably longer than the average person. Right?
So there's bigger and taller. Yeah.
And there's more time for it to kind of stay in your body. That super highway is just longer because it has to try to fuel this bigger vessel.
How long is our intestinal tract?
It depends on the person.
How long is
you think? Several feet. I'll just put it like that. Yeah. It depends on the person. So but it's also, we tend to think it's very uniform. We think these things are uniform across the board.
If you eat a healthy meal, let's say an hour before bed, I'm talking about grains and lean meat and healthy stuff, or if you eat pizza an hour before bed, are they both going to impact your ability to sleep better, or is the quality of the food before you go to bed matter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The short answer is, yeah, it does matter. So the probably the two things that would have the greatest determination would be the simplicity of the carbohydrates or the glycemic load, because that's going to impact the sort of glycemic roller coaster you go on at night. And then probably the amount of protein, because that has a greater contribution to what's called the thermogenic effect of food. So the thermogenic effect is how much does your body temperature actually rise to digest the food. Our bodies want to be very cold at night. So anything you do that opposes that leads to lousy sleep.
So what foods help you sleep better, that keep you colder? What are those foods? Whether it's an hour before or 3 hours before.
Yeah, I honestly, it's like almost anything you're going to eat is going to come with something that's going to slightly raise your temperature. So I just generally say, try to not eat too much before bed. And I go out of my way to avoid the two things that I think are worse. So I just say I wouldn't have huge protein before bed, and I don't want to have anything that's going to raise my blood sugar before bed. So, I'd have an avocado before bed. I'd have, something that's like, I just generally don't eat before bed.
The body really rewards you in terms of if you wait or if you don't eat right before bed. Is it going to sleep better, sleep deeper, be cooler, and therefore help you have more energy the next day if you don't eat before bed?
Yeah, and this has, at least for me, been most easy to exhibit, and I think many of my patients would agree during periods of fasting. So fasting is kind of a funky state because you're altering so many other things in the physiology. But one of the things that happens, especially by about the second day of a water-only fast, is you really are seeing the impacts of what deep sleep can look like in a state that is totally absent food. And it's very interesting because you're competing with two forces, one that's keeping you awake and one that's helping you sleep a lot deeper. The one that's keeping you awake is cortisol. You have more of it. You have more stress hormones when you're fasting because that's the thing from a prehistoric standpoint that would have been going on, right? Fasting would trigger a signal that says, go get more food. Right.
Be alert, be focused.
Be alert, go get food. Like we don't want to die. And so that's kind of keeping you awake. But the flip side of that is the total absence of nutrient is allowing you to get into this amazing sleep, and your body temperature is really going down because your body's turning down its metabolism. So I actually find fasting sleep to be some of the most amazing physiology because I'm watching this plummeting temperature, rising heart rate variability, falling heart rate, all of these really valuable things, but a little bit of rising cortisol that can lead to shorter sleep times. But I still feel quite, rejuvenated by sleep.
If you're a kid and you're eating a lot of junk food, you're not sleeping, you're staying up late because you're playing video games all night, but you've got all this energy all day and you're active. Is there a negative in your early ages, teens, early 20s through lacking sleep, eating poorly? Or is there a way to recover in your 20s from the damage you've done in your before 20?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly you can break it down into sort of the behavioral habit side, and you can talk about it through the physiologic lens. The good news is before the age of 20 or 30, we are pretty remarkably resilient. I mean, you're an athlete, so you can relate. How old are you now, Lewis? You're in your
37.
So you might not have fully appreciated, I'm 47, so I'm a full decade older than you. And when I think about 17 to 27 to 37 to 47, I can really talk about those decades through the lens of resilience. Mm-hmm. Like at 17, you could shoot me and I think I'd still get up the next day. Right. Like you just couldn't, right?
You're Superman. Yeah.
You're absolutely Superman. And I don't know. I feel like the first observation of not being Superman for me kind of kicked in about 42-ish, about 5 years ago, was the first time I was like, oh, so this is what people talk about, right? Like you can't just go out and crush it every minute of every day. And I think that's just one lens, which is through the lens of exercise. But the same is true of physiology, right? Like, or I'll give you another example. Many of my patients have observed this. I've observed this. Like, I was never a big drinker in college, but certainly there were enough occasions in med school or college where I'd go out and drink far more than anyone should. And yet somehow the next day I could like get up at 6 a.m. and go and do whatever I need to do. Like I remember one night actually being out drinking until 3 a.m. I mean, having so much to drink, it was ridiculous. And somehow getting up at 6 in that morning to do a 100-mile bike ride.
Oh my gosh, man.
Probably still partially drunk. And but felt fine by about like 2 hours into the ride. Today, if I had 3 glasses of wine, like the headache I'm going to have the next day is going to last me till the middle of the day.
Is that because your body was able to assimilate the glucose into the muscles and it used it to its advantage then, and now it's like it takes over?
It's a very good question. I could sort of speculate on what it is, but I just think there's there's this thing called homeostasis, right, which is one of the hallmarks of youth, and it's one of the hallmarks of aging, and it's the ability to, or it's our lack of homeostasis. We lose this ability to get the body back into the zone of optimal performance. So everything about the human body is very particular. For example, take pH, which is the amount of acidity in our body. We're so highly regulated, like our body really needs to be at a pH of 7.4. So 7 would kill you, and 7.6 or 7.7 would kill you. And this is a scale that goes from 0 to 14, to put that in perspective.
Wow.
Okay, so tiny perturbations will kill you. How good is our body at staying in that? Amazing. Temperature, right? You go much below about 94, you're dead. You go much above about 104, you're dead. How good are we at staying in that range? Oh, I mean good. I mean, we generally stay within a 1.5 degree band. So this homeostasis thing is amazing. It gets weaker and weaker as we get older. And so your ability to tolerate bad food, bad sleep, sedentary behavior, more stress, all those things, it just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And I think it declines non-linearly. So again, what you experience as a decline between 30 and 40, it's bad. 40 to 50, yeah, that's worse. 50 to 60, you can fall off a cliff.
Is there a way to reverse this?
I don't think we know. I think you can definitely slow the progression of it. And you know what? I would say you probably can reverse it, right? So just as you can clearly reverse diabetes is a glucose homeostasis problem, and it's clearly reversible. So there are probably some variants of this that are harder to reverse than others. But no, I think we can reverse this process. But it gets harder. It gets harder as time goes on, and it gets harder the further you are into sort of the physiologic trap.
What are you doing to reverse it now that you've been experiencing this kind of, not maybe a cliff, but a dip over the last 5 years for yourself? How are you thinking about it?
Well, I sort of had a change of heart 5 years ago. So actually 6 years ago, 2014. So I sort of hung up my bike, which at that point I'd switched from swimming to cycling as sort of my main sport. But I, at that point, a couple of things had happened. So one, I had become very familiar with a lot of emerging research on excessive cardiovascular training, which again is a rich man's problem.
Ultra marathons, ultra biking, ultra swimming, hiking.
That's right. So again, and it's the same sort of curve, right? Where as dose of exercise goes up, mortality comes down, but it has this little bit of a J where once you start to get into hyper amounts of exercise, especially over the age of 40, you're actually driving an increase in mortality. Now, again,
really?
Yes.
Does that mean like running a marathon once a year, or is it running a marathon every week?
Yeah, great point. Running a marathon once a year, probably not increasing your mortality at all. But, running 40, 50 miles a week probably is.
Wow, really?
Especially at that age. Now, again, this gets to your point about resilience. Someone in their 20s doing that doesn't seem to have any impact on mortality. It really only seems to be an issue if you continue. In fact, I did an interview with a cardiologist, James O'Keefe, on my podcast, who is, the world's expert on this. And it was actually James's work 6 years ago, because I heard him speak at a conference 10 years ago. We became friends. It's one of those things, I'm sure you've experienced this, where you hear something and you don't want it to be true. So you basically come up with all the reasons you're going to poke holes in it until you can't anymore.
You find the evidence the other way. Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually it became very difficult to ignore that this hyper amount of exercise was counterproductive. So that's one piece of the change 6 years ago.
It's probably bad that I just committed to doing the marathon next year yesterday.
That's all right though. You'll be fine. I just think don't do one a month. You know?
Exactly.
And then I think the second thing was I realized, like, it was sort of funny, but I realized like my prime was so far behind me that I needed to think about like what was I doing this in service of, right? Like, and not that I needed anyone other than myself to do these things, because I'm very self-motivated. So I don't but just as a joke, one day I asked my wife, I said, "Hey, do you know what my PR is for 20K?" Like
bike, run, or swim?
Yeah, bike on a 20K bike on the time trial. And I was like, this is my wife. She hears me talk about this stuff all the time. I have spreadsheets and models and data, and I analyze my power data every single day. And I'm trying to break the record for San Diego. Like, I'm really so switched on to this. She'll probably get it within a minute. She'll guess what my PR is within a minute. She was off by 20 minutes, meaning she wasn't even in the zip code. So I was like, that's funny. Like, it's like literally the most important person in my life couldn't care less about this. And what I realized was, I need to start thinking about a different sport, which is the sport of longevity. So what does it mean to be a kick-ass 100-year-old? And so that was the beginning of a mental model for me that in the past 2 years has gained much more traction, called the Centenarian Olympics. So how do you train to kick ass at 100 should you get there? And of course, everywhere along the way. So that now dominates my landscape of training, which means I don't, care about how fast I can, ride a 40-kilometer time trial, because that doesn't quite fit into what a centenarian needs to be able to do.
What is your mindset going into a 40-mile bike then, or some type of experience? Is it more the joy of it?
So I don't train. No, my training is very specific, but now it is fundamentally organized around 4 pillars. So the pillars being stability, strength, mitochondrial or aerobic efficiency, and anaerobic performance. And so each of those then has a super layered detail approach. And I still ride my bike 4 hours a week. So it's a fraction of what I used to do. And it's now very much geared to a certain energy system and a type of training.
What was the fourth one? Stability, strength, mitochondria, and
mitochondrial efficiency or aerobic efficiency. And then the fourth and final one is anaerobic performance.
So you focus on those 4 metrics now on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Those 4 pillars sort of make up the training program, which is then in service of something that I invite every patient to define for themselves, which is because you will have a different set of variables from me potentially, but my Centenarian Olympics has 18 events in it. Like I want to be able to pull myself out of a pool that where there's a 1 foot gap between the water and the curb, like lift myself up. I want to be able to hop over a 3 foot fence. I want to be able to walk 3 miles in an hour. I want to be able to carry 2 10-pound bags up 4 flights of stairs. I want to be able to goblet squat 30 pounds because that's about the weight of a kid. I want to be able to get up off the floor without using my hands. So I could rattle off all of my 18 things and you would say, Peter, those seem really easy. And you'd be right as a 37-year-old stud. But the point is,
as a 60-year-old, a lot of them aren't easy.
Most 60-year-olds couldn't do this if their life depended on it. And I have yet to meet but maybe one person in their 80s or 90s who can. And so that's the aspiration, is to get to that level in your 80s or 90s. How do you work that backwards to inform your training in your 60s, in your 50s, and in your 40s? And it's actually very hard.
And as I'm getting into, I'm 3 years away from 40, what should someone in my age range be thinking about when they're, I'm healthy, I feel good, maybe have some aches and pains here and there when I'm training hard or something, but for the most part, I feel amazing. What should I be thinking about moving forward so that I continue to feel amazing and have the ability to do these things?
So I think it's never too late to at least become familiar with what these ideas mean. And it doesn't mean that you have to go whole hog and devote yourself to this. Like, I've obviously made a very conscious choice that I don't go to swim meets. I don't go to bike races. Like, I don't train for those things anymore. And a big part of that is just time. There are only 168 hours in a week. And, I have a very clear set of priorities, and I'm willing to set aside 10 to 12 hours a week for exercise, which by many people's standards is still quite a lot, but probably by the standards that you exercise, and certainly by the standards that I used to exercise, I've never exercised so little in my life. So I have to be very efficient with every one of those minutes. And that means I'm laser focused on the 4 principles of that. In your case, I think it comes down to saying, okay, how much time do you want to devote to the long game? How much time do you want to devote to the short game? Another way to think about this would be investing. If you're looking at an investment portfolio, you might say, how much do I want to put both time and money, so the actual capital I set aside, but also the amount of time I spend deliberating over it, into my retirement account, versus how much do I want to invest as a day trader for short-term gains, for money that I'm going to be using in the near term that's maybe even supplementing my income today. Mm-hmm. You could have totally different strategies for that, and that's totally fine. So I'm just in the category where I'm only thinking about long-term permanent capital. Right. And so that's the first question, is you have to decide, how do you want to do that? And it might be that you say, Peter, at 37, I just want to focus on running a marathon. I've always wanted to do an Ironman, so I'm going to go and do that. And, I want to climb Mount Everest, and that's going to require, like, you might have a whole bunch of these bucket list things. And truthfully, I would say do them now, because it's only going to get harder.
Because you're not going to be able to do it later. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you're going to want to do it later. So get those things out of the way.
Yeah.
And then maybe when you turn 40, you say, okay, now it's time I'm going to really focus on my centenarian Olympics when I have a better sense of what those events look like for me personally.
Before we continue this video, make sure to subscribe below and turn on the notification bell right now so you don't miss out on these great videos every single day.
You should not be eating for this 2-inch by 3-inch piece of muscle, your tongue, but you should be eating for the microbiome, for the bacteria and all the other cute little viruses that actually live in your gut, live in your mouth, live on your skin. And if you eat for them, they will take care of you because you are actually their home. We're merely a condominium for bugs. And
how many bugs do we have on our body or in us?
So, yeah, we have well over 100 trillion bacteria. And since the Human Microbiome Project was, finished about 5 years ago now, I mean, we didn't know that these guys really existed. In fact, I was on my podcast, the Dr. Gundry podcast. We had Dr. David Kessler, who was head of the FDA in the Reagan years, who made the guidelines for the labels, the labeling laws on the back of packages that show saturated fats and carbohydrates. And the labels, by the way, if we get into this, are completely wrong. They were forced on the Reagan administration by big food companies.
Wow.
And so, anyhow, if you feed bacteria what they want to eat, and that's just all in the longevity paradox, they will take care of you. They'll take care of the wall, the lining of your gut, and you will not actually age, which is kind of cool.
So if you take care of
them,
of the bugs in your body, you will not age.
Right. So you got 100 trillion bacteria. You have over 10,000 different species of bacteria. And just last year, they discovered another 1,000, so who knows?
Right.
So 99% of the genetic material that exists in you and me is non-human genetic material.
Wow.
Our genes are actually so unimportant, it's kind of humorous. And when people take a family history, what they're actually finding out is if your parents taught you how to eat, and most people's parents teach the kids how to eat, and your parents had diabetes, or your parents had high blood pressure, or your parents had coronary artery disease, and you eat like your parents did, the odds are that you will do that.
Right.
For two reasons: the food choices that you made, but more importantly, you inherited your bacteria from your parents and actually your siblings. And
so it's not the genes of your parents that mean you are susceptible to heart disease or Alzheimer's or whatever, right? It's not the genes of your parents. It's typically the foods they ate, that you're probably eating the exact same foods that cause the same type of problems.
Correct. Yeah. Right. I mean, there is an Alzheimer's gene, and my program, according to Dale Bredesen, is the best way not to activate that gene. And there are certain genes that people inherit that make the world's meanest, nastiest, stickiest cholesterol that most doctors don't even measure. And oh, by the way, if you're prescribed a statin drug, a lipid-lowering drug, it actually worsens this other particle.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, there are genes, but they're such a small part. Nature magazine had a big article in late 2018, I think proving that only about 7 or 8% of what will happen to us is based on our genes, and 97 or 98% of what's going to happen to us is based on our environment and our food choices.
Our decisions.
Our decisions, yeah.
Now you said we can,
aging is essentially a choice, is what I'm hearing you say. But if someone watching this saying, well, Dr. Gundry, you've got white hair, you look older than when you were 10 years old. So
Yes.
How can you say that you can eat certain things that can reverse aging or can make you not age when you look older than when you were younger?
That's true. I'm definitely chronologically older. But recently on my podcast, I had Dr. Terry Walls, who I think is very famous, rightfully so, for reversing her MS, her multiple sclerosis. And she did it via diet. She did it initially by eating 9 cups of vegetables a day. And I dare people to try to eat 9 cups of vegetables.
A lot of fiber, right?
It's a lot of fiber. And we'll get back to fiber, because I think that's probably the key. And this is actually what Jack LaLanne was trying to say. If it tastes good, spit it out. And Terry became famous for telling people that when you look in the toilet every morning, you should see a very large coiled snake looking back up at you. And in fact, in the plant paradox, in the original manuscript, I had said, when you look in the toilet, you should see a giant anaconda looking back up at you. And my editor, Julie Wills, called me up. She said, do you know there's a movie where an anaconda is coming out of the toilet? And I said, oh yeah. She said, I don't think we want that visual in your book. And she said, well, let's take that out. So, but what we didn't know, what you didn't know, I didn't know, is that giant coiled snake is not the fiber and the roughage that we ate. It's actually bacteria that have eaten the fiber.
No way.
And
bacteria inside of us?
Oh, yeah.
That's coming out.
That's coming out. So most of your poop is, if you will, baby bacteria.
No way.
And so the more...
So we want to get the bacteria out of us?
No, you want them to grow and prosper. And the more they grow and prosper...
Sounds like aliens in our body that's like feeding us.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that is kind of hard to embrace is we probably only exist as a place for bacteria to live on Earth.
Wow.
And intelligence...
So if there was no bacteria inside of us...
We're done.
We would die.
So we know that we can breed germ-free mice. An interesting fun fact that I put in the longevity paradox, my 5th grade science project was to build a germ-free mouse environment. This was in 1960. And so this isn't my first rodeo. So we can raise germ-free mice that have no bacteria in them, have no bugs in them. And they live short lives.
Really?
They have horrible immune systems.
They get sick. They
get sick, yeah. And so they're the basis of so much of what we know. And so bacteria are incredibly important. And we know now that these bacteria actually teach our immune system from day one. In fact, scary, we used to think that the placenta, where the baby, the womb, the uterus that feeds the baby is sterile. Of course it has to be, because the baby has to be sterile. The placenta is full of bacteria.
Feeding
the baby. And it turns out that the bacteria in the placenta actually give information to the baby's immune system before the baby even pops out of the womb. And
so we need these viruses, these good viruses.
We need these viruses and bacteria. We need them. And in fact, fun fact, long ago, the only way to treat bacterial infections were viruses that could actually infect bacteria and kill viruses. And Eli Lilly Company from Indianapolis got its start, this giant pharmaceutical company, as what's called a bacteriophage company. Bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria. And it turns out that viruses actually are really useful in us as well. We have trillions and trillions and trillions of viruses in us right now.
What's the difference between a good virus and a bad virus?
If the good virus is doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, let's do a deep dive into microbiology.
Okay. And what is the definition of virus?
Okay, so a virus is probably the smallest reproducible form of life, however we want to define life. So most living things are capable of reproducing themselves one way or another, dividing or multiplying one way or another.
Just like humans.
Exactly. So a virus, unfortunately, cannot replicate itself. It has to borrow another cell and take over the cell's machinery to manufacture more copies of viruses. And that's how they get reproduced. But in the end, every living creature is here just to make a new copy. And you and I only exist was to make a new copy.
Wow.
And I hopefully actually only exist so my bacteria can make new copies of themselves. I'm a condominium for my inhabitants.
Duplication, yeah.
And if they're happy and I'm a good landlord to them, they will keep the place nice, and they actually would like me to stick around a very long time because I'm their home. So if I give them, my tenants, what they want, they'll keep me around.
Okay.
All right, so getting back to Terry Walls.
Yes.
So Terry Walls and her giant anacondas. And whenever we do a podcast with her from Iowa, she has these dolls of poop.
Really?
Yeah.
I gotta meet this person.
Oh, yeah. So we've become friends through the years, and our diets recommendations are very similar and becoming more and more similar as time goes on. And recently, she and her wife began doing time-restricted feeding. For the last 18 years during the winter, I only eat calories 2 hours a day. So that 22 out of 24 hours, I'm not eating any calories. And I've done that for 18 years now. So that's pretty interesting, time-restricted feeding. Time-restricted feeding means you limit the number of hours you eat in the day.
Wow.
So she, and we had talked about this, so she and her wife actually really started doing this. And I see her about once a year, and I noticed on the podcast, she looks the best I have ever seen her. And so we're talking about this, and she said, well, I started, after kind of reading and listening and, longevity paradox, that this is something real. And it's not just me, other people have done this. And we started doing it. And I started doing it, and then my wife said, there's something here, I'm going to join you. And they have kids. And now she's saying, our kids have noticed that we are getting younger. And I said, well, you're right. I said, because, I've known you through the years, and you clearly are, younger now than when I knew you a few years ago. And she said, yeah, our kids notice, and they're calling us, Benjamin Button, because we're de-aging. So I think this whole anti-aging thing is wrong. I think it is really quite possible to de-age. And as I talk about in the longevity paradox, what's fascinating is that, and you can prove this in animal models, that you age as your microbiome changes, number one, but more importantly, the wall of your gut should be impermeable, even though it's only 1 cell thick. And the surface area of your gut, my gut, is the same as a tennis court. So inside of you and me is a tennis court.
Crazy.
Surface area. And the problem is that that wall of our gut is only 1 cell thick. And these cells are held together with tight junctions. Best example for anyone who's no longer young is Red Rover, which we all played as a kid, where we locked arms and people ran across, and a big guy like
I always
you
ran through.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go.
Oh yeah, and you're the guy, you know, and the two girls. Ah, here comes Lewis. Ah, and they don't get to play that in school anymore. By the way, it's too dangerous.
Oh right.
Yeah,
Kids get hurt.
because of people like you. So they're all locked arm in arm, and as long as they're locked arm in arm, all those, 100 trillion bacteria and all the other toxins stay on their side of the wall. On the other side of the wall, 60 to 70% of all your white blood cells, all your immune system is lined up on that wall. Why? Because that's basically the border. And if your invading army is coming through the border, you want to have your army on the other side. And what's cool is as long as that wall is intact, you do not age.
If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.
What are the biggest questions you have out there right now?
We found that we can reset the age of a cell.